There's also this keep changes setting. So if we turn on keep changes and then turn on the thing when it's actually, if we play time, then we turn on the keyframe, it will restore that state as normal, but then when we turn it off, it will leave it at that recorded state. It will still be able to change afterwards, so we'll demonstrate that. So if we leave that as not keep changes and stamp a mover to it, then that will move to the right, but then when we turn on the keyframe, it drags it to that position. But now, when I turn it off, it will still be moving to the right, and it will be restored to whatever position it was at before the keyframe was on. So without keep changes, it restores the state to what it was before the keyframe was powered. With keep changes, it doesn't do that. So if you play it and let it move over there, you turn it on, now it's up here. Now when we turn it off, it starts from there and continues, like, allowing it to be affected by other things. That could be physics or a mover or other animations and so on. Now something to bear in mind with the keep changes is that if the only thing going on is this one keyframe with the keep changes, and you try to animate it, it can mess up. So if we get a value slider and we put it through a signal manipulator, we're only going to do this so that we can get this graph. So if we play time and we change this value, we can see the graph of how that value changed over time. So this keyframe, this value slider will be 0. We'll keyframe it to full. So with keep changes off, then when you turn it off, it goes back to normal, of course. With keep changes on, then it'll stay at the recorded state after you turn it off. Now, if you animate it though, if we wire the timer output into the value slider, we can see that gives us a percentage going up. So that we'll use that to power the keyframe so that it kind of animates up in a linear fashion over 5 seconds. So if we rewind, so if we put that not to keep changes and we play time, it goes up in a linear way just at the same kind of speed as that is, just fine. Now if we turn on keep changes and we play, then it's kind of zooming up. This is because at each point it's comparing the original whatever value it currently is, and it's applying the change. So it's like 10%, it goes to there, it goes to 0.1, but then the next time it's going to go to 20% towards the end from that 1%, so it kind of jumps even further. So it increases at a kind of exponential rate instead. Now if we use a value slider and to just power it, and we just power it a tiny bit, and we play, it still does that thing because it's kind of stepping at 0.1 every time and getting faster and faster towards the end. So that's something to be aware of if you're trying to keep changes. If we had that on a timeline and we used R2 on this fader setting, to just this makes it power more and more over time basically as it goes through the timeline. So it works fine when keep changes is off and it goes linearly, and then keep changes on and it goes extra fast again. That also happens if you have a keyframe that's just empty, so nothing is recorded in here, but then it's useful for, you can still blend to it like that. So if you have that and it's not on keep changes, that works fine as well, has a linear progression to it. With keep changes on, then it will do that fast thing again. So it actually gets to full even when it's just partway through, that kind of thing. Now if this first keyframe though, sets this to 0, now it's blending between 0 and the full value of this, every time. So when it's here, it's still blending half 0 and half this value. So then it doesn't kind of have this exponential curve. So it still has that proper linear progression. After the timeline is done, it leaves it at that value, even when it's like deleted or something like that. And if we actually look at it through here, if I just delete that, to see that exponential curve, you can see it's like going straight up like that, and it seems to actually slow at the top. There's some sort of maths thing going on, but it's probably not what you were intending. So if it's not what you're intending, this is kind of how to fix it and what's going on. So if we actually use these keyframes outside of a timeline, you can do the same thing to fix it in the same way. Over here, into there. So what we want is for this to be high output, while this is low output, and then that will go lower and that will go higher at the same rate. So if we just use a NOT gate, this will actually do it, because a NOT gate will take a percentage signal like this, and when it's at 1, it'll output 0. When it's at 0.8, then it will output 0.2. So it kind of flips it around just between 0 and 1. So then that will do exactly what we want. So we're leaving this value slider at 0. We're using this keyframe to set it to 1. Now if we just powered it slowly over time, with that percentage going up, then it will go up over time, as you would expect. And if we put it through the NOT gate, then we'll get the inverse of that. It will start powered and slowly go down instead. So we'll put that one through the NOT gate so it goes down. We'll put this one into here so it goes up at the same rate. So now this one actually needs to store it at 0, and this one stores it at 1. So we'll do that. And that works normally, kind of linearly, as you'd expect. Now if we put all that in a chip, just to demonstrate that the keep changes is still working okay, we can use a switch. Okay. So it's going up and up, and then if we turn it off, then it keeps the changes, because that one's keeping the changes just fine. Now if we record this into this keyframe, the object being up there, and then we turn it on while time is playing, we can use these other settings like springiness. So if we put that all the way to the max and turn it on, it kind of wobbles around the point that it wants to be at. And if we just give it a tiny bit of springiness, it will just like wobble a tiny bit. Like that. So that's really useful for adding kind of secondary motion and so on. We'll turn on keep changes. So we've got a mover on here, so it's moving to the right. Then we turn this on and it moves it to that point. And then we let go and then it's allowed to move again. But you notice it kind of had that weird little jitter at the start. This is because the springiness, and it has this huge delay. So if I turn that on and then off immediately, it should start moving right now, you may think. But it doesn't, because it has to wait until this springiness is completely done with and it's completely settled, and then it will allow other things to move it as normal. So if we turn this on and wait, so it seems to be settled, but it's still actually just moving. Oh, I think the mover is like struggling to move it basically. So now if we turn it off, then it's allowed to move and it moves as normal. So be aware of that. If you use springiness on a puppet or something and you're recording the position of it, then it can kind of start dragging things behind it. And the springiness also, if you half power it, so if I grab a slider, it will restore that position, but it will also affect the springiness. So if you put it to full, it will be very wobbly. If we make that super wobbly, it'll be very wobbly and it will go to the full extent of what's recorded. But if you just go to little, it's not very springy at all, and it only goes halfway. So you can't have it very springy and go to halfway all on the same keyframe. You'd have to do some sort of rig setup to get it to work like that for you. This can also work on gadgets. So if I move this switch over there, then that gadget is also being affected by this springiness. So it also works on rotations. If this moves that like that and that like that, then we run time so that the springiness works, and they kind of flop about like that. So if I had a trigger zone in the world, if I actually put it down with that and move it up, then it springifies the trigger zone and its area. But if instead of affecting the gadget, you affect the position of the zone, that doesn't work in the same way. So now it just restores that position. So if I keyframe this to this middle red and then make it springy, and then I play time and turn it on, there's no springiness to that because it needs to have like a physical thing within the scene to affect it in that way. I'd like to thank Kelpiones, Ex-Cantaloupe, Shadow of Callus, and all of my other supporters for making this tutorial possible. Check out TAPgiles.com to find out how you can support me in helping Dreams creators. Thanks for your consideration, and I'll see you in the next one.